I think we, as Bowman said, we want to make sure we save time for your questions too. But if something on a certain topic we're on jumps up, throw your hand in the air. The work we do at Bernstein is about advising the holistic individual and what is great wealth worth if you don't have the health to enjoy it. But also on the other side of the coin, as 90 is the new 60 and people are living longer, if you aren't doing the right type of financial planning and you're living to 100, you can have some problems. And so we're constantly having these conversations with folks and super excited to have wonderful partners throughout the country. And these are two of those wonderful partners. So we're going to dive into a lot of different areas. We'll go quick and deep where we can to try to cover as much as we can. But I'm so happy to have these two friends with us today. So Dr. Aaron Wenzel of Brentwood MD is a leading concierge doctor, author, and entrepreneur. And Zane Griggs is a health coach, expert, and author in training, nutrition, overall metabolic health, and being fit after 50. Zane and I trained this morning together, and so if I'm grunting because I'm a little sore, you can thank him. But thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So let's dive right in. And I want to start with an opening sort of high-level question or something that's maybe fundamental. And that's the question, am I advocating enough for myself when it comes to my health? Many people rely on their doctors, but how much responsibility should we take? And what questions should we be asking? Aaron, I don't know if you want to start.
I'm a big believer in self-advocacy. I think now more than ever, it's not only more important, but it's more practical than ever. I think that those who are the loudest voice for their own ambitions and their own goals and their own unique situation tend to have better outcomes. And they also tend to find their person and their team that they're well aligned with, which creates a frictionless working relationship, which tends to be really useful when you're trying to achieve some really great results. I think that we are fundamentally at the end of sitting back and waiting for your doctor to tell you what to do, in terms of without consequence. I mean, what we will begin to notice, I think, is people around us, peers, colleagues, similar situation, they're outpacing our results. I don't think there's room in the current marketplace for reactionary medicine any longer. I think that the primary posture needs to be offensive mindset. And I think the sooner individuals adopt that mindset and get into a team where that offensive mindset is really at the foundation, I think the results are going to be much better. And I think advocacy, co-decision making with a physician who's aligned with you, I think is just the bedrock for really, really good, high probability of good outcomes.
Double click on that team aspect for a moment, just to make sure we're clear. So when you say making sure your team is in place, you're talking about your primary doctor. What else?
Yeah, I mean, I love that Bowman draws the similarities between what y'all do here and what I do. I often call myself a health asset manager. And like you all, I individually try to maximize somebody's potential while managing risk. It's essentially the same framework. And with new emerging technologies, how does this help my members live a better life and live a longer life? Those are things that are very important, and they're very, very much cohesive with wealth building and sustainability. I'm not sure how valuable. I think there's a missed opportunity if we die at 68 with $100 million in the bank when it was avoidable.
Yeah.
I also think it's tragic if you live to be 120 and you don't have any money. Mm-hmm. In terms of minimizing impact and mark and legacy and these kinds of things, I think they dance very well together. And I think about the amount of impact that people can make on the back half of their life. I mean, if you could add 20, 30 years of high quality living, I mean, what would that mean for you personally, your family, your business, your community, your church, the organizations that you feel philanthropic towards? I mean, these are massive opportunities, especially when you think about the compound nature of wisdom, insight, not just economics. It really gets really exciting.
Great. Zane, on that topic, I'm curious, when you're working with clients, what are the key signs that someone is not taking enough control of their health? Like, what do you see?
I see blood work that is not, that is kind of just standard. And they don't understand it. And two, there are not preventative biomarkers on the blood work. Like, for instance, fasting insulin's a big one. It could tell you if diabetes is forming 5 or 10 years long before your blood sugar comes out of range. Many doctors don't include it for some reason. It's not a medical, because we don't have a medication for it. And the medical system generally, standard, is set up to react to disease, not prevent it. All of my tools as a health coach are to prevent disease with diet, exercise, sleep. So I've had to integrate, and a lot of it I've actually learned working with Dr. Wenzel and some of his clients is being able to help them look at their blood work and instruct them to ask for these biomarkers to get eyes on what's happening under the surface before you need a procedure or a medication, and to help them connect what they're seeing on those biomarkers with their lifestyle habits and how those interplay, and how they're feeling, how they're sleeping. So for everything, and most of it's fasting insulin, looking at, depending on the age group, which, anyone over 40 should be watching sex hormones, so testosterone, thyroid for, ladies, obviously add on to testosterone, estrogen and progesterone. There's C-reactive proteins. So there's certain inflammatory markers, but mostly it's metabolic. My focus is metabolic health, because that's where the disease that's taking most of us out lies in insulin resistance and metabolic health. So heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, and all the things fatty liver disease, all the things that come from that. And so it's getting eyes on metabolic health. Prevention or reversal is necessary. But so that's kind of where.
Well, and there's so much in there, and it's a perfect transition to where exactly I wanted to go. So, which is, before we get into the longevity side of the conversation, or the biohacking side, let's look at the big picture.
Yeah.
So we put a little slide together here. The top causes of death today. See if this works. Here we go. Top causes of death today, 10 out of 10 are chronic diseases, and 6 out of 10 are metabolic related. So what does that tell us about the current state of health and prevention?
Well, in my experience, and longevity is a unique area of interest of mine, and just by reverse engineering the things that kill humans, I've been able to come up with my thesis on how one should approach living a long time, and it's solve for these guys to start with. And when you really dig into these top 10, as you mentioned, 7 of the top 10 killers of human beings are either directly or indirectly linked to metabolic disease, specifically insulin resistance and or diabetes. This is not like a big problem. It is the problem. It is the health crisis on the planet for our species. We have very low probability of living a long and vibrant life if we don't have an active, aggressive, on-guard approach towards hunting for metabolic inefficiencies. And it starts with early markers in our 20s and 30s, as Zane is mentioning. Hey, my body's getting different results. What are your labs? What's your fasting insulin? What are some of these markers telling us? Nobody wakes up one day with diabetes, right? Like, this is going on 10, 15, 20 years in the background, depending on your life. You don't wake up with a heart attack. You don't wake up with cancer. These things are building, and they're all metabolic diseases. They're all diseases of energy dysregulation. And so I think it's really profound because it helps. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of attention on this subject of longevity right now. And in my experience, the single greatest thing other than not smoking that you could do to add a meaningful strategy to your life is delay insulin resistance as long as possible, and you might even prevent it.
So to that, why is metabolic dysfunction at the center of all these modern diseases? I think this is an obvious question, but so let me preemptively ask, is it our food system? Is it just behavioral choices? Like, what's behind all this?
Well, it's multifactorial. I mean, we start with, we're omnivores. We can eat anything, and it's a dilemma. What do you eat when you can eat anything? You compound that with a 2025 world where anything you want can be at your doorstep in an hour or less. there's no friction between desire and outcome. You then compound that with the fact that our energy outlay as a species is as low as it's ever been. It's never been easier to be a human being, ever. I mean, we have a lot of problems, but they're higher order problems. It used to be really, 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 really hard to be a human and stay alive. And epidemiology shows us that life expectancy average was under 50 in the 1950s. Now, there were world wars, there were a lot of things driving things, there was infant mortality, there was a lot of things driving that. But this whole notion that humans can live a long time on average is a relatively new concept. And when you combine that we are able to live a long time with the fact that we can eat anything and anything is available, then you go into our healthcare system, which is actually not healthcare, it's sick care. It's actually gotten really, really, really hyper optimized at managing disease. It doesn't make you healthy. It keeps you from dying, but you stay sick. So there's a lot of drugs and treatments and protocols to keep you alive, but you actually don't get any healthier. So we're staying alive, we're staying propped up longer. I forget the data point, but I think it's something like 60 cents of every dollar spent by Medicare, and that's a big number, spent in the last 6 months of life. It's interesting, you know. Then you combine with the fact that as a culture, Western world, we don't do good with death. So we hang on a long, long time. We're not moving. We're eating poor quality. We're eating lots of poor quality. We're not deploying a lot of energy. There's a lot of confusion. There are a lot of billion-dollar companies that are jockeying for our discretionary income to sell us the next quick fix. When really, boy, we just need to eat better, eat more of better, less of bad, and be more moving, get eyes on things a lot earlier, and we can absolutely change the trajectory of people's health.
Yeah. One of our economists says that to tie this back to what's going on in the world and how this is a societal issue and not just an individual issue. One of our economists says that the U.S. government is an insurance company with an army. And if you look at all the deficit and budget conversations that are going on right now, and you really look at the breakdown of those numbers, it's Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, defense, and then the discretionary stuff that everyone's arguing about is like this in the pie chart. And it's fascinating that it's a major thing that people think is maybe more individualistic, but it's really driving so much of our society and our economy. Yeah. Zane, so I want to come back to the nutrition stuff in a minute, but when we think about metabolic health and training, how should people be training to optimize their metabolic health? Is there some key advice you would give?
Yes, and that's refined over working out for, 40 years, trying to, from college, you're trying to get muscles, then you just want to be healthier and survive and feel good, right? For metabolic health, I do think we've got a divide of people who don't exercise at all, and then we've got a lot of people who over-exercise and create a lot of inflammation and even elevated cortisol, I think even health risk on the other end of the spectrum. Where I'm falling now is, to put it simply, strength training 2 or 3 times a week, maybe some sprint training once a week or every 10 days, and then a lot of walking, zone 2 or lower movement daily, pickleball, whatever, leisure activity, just move. It doesn't need to be exhaustive. Stay in zone 2, stay below that fat burning zone. We've talked about the 180 minus your age, for as much as you can to get the benefit of creating more mitochondria, better fat burning, without the wear and tear that comes with high intensity activity. I would not recommend marathons for 95% of the population. I'm sorry. You're gonna create heart disease. You're gonna create elevated cortisol, probably more visceral fat, sleep disturbances, increased appetite. So I think we can simplify it. A lot of people like that. They kind of get addicted to that push and try to do everything harder. Yeah. at some point in your life, you got to get smarter.
Yeah.
And it's not about trying to bust through the wall every time. Understand you have to recover from exercise to even move forward. And this is how elite athletes train. Mm-hmm. And so it's a lot of light movement and then small, short bouts of intensity to retain muscle and to get a little bit of training for, like we talked about the VO2 max, to be, kind of train that anaerobic threshold between aerobic and anaerobic, but it doesn't need to be frequent.
Yeah.
And so that's where you're going to get the benefit of the movement and the metabolic benefit of the movement and the insulin sensitivity, but without over-indexing the stress hormones, which are just as bad in the couch potato as they are in the guy who's out pounding the pavement for, an hour a day at a little too high of a heart rate that's ideal for him.
Yeah, because most people don't realize if you put the treadmill on a 12 incline and walk at 3.0, you're probably going to actually burn more fat than you are if you're going to go out and sprint for 10
and
minutes.
build more mitochondria, which is your energy production, and you're going to have, without the wear and tear, without the inflammation and the elevated cortisol and the stress and the disturbed sleep and all the other things that come with it. So
correct. And you can watch a movie while you do that, so it's actually quite enjoyable. Sorry, Lisa.
Return emails, whatever you want to do. I mean, it's a functional movement. That's how we were born to literally walk.
And mobility, flexibility, as we get older, sometimes
include it. I mean, that's part of that low intensity exercise. It's like include that as part, not just walk, but I mean, move, flex. Because if we think about falling risk, right? So falling is a major risk as we get older, right? Not just the osteoporosis, but just getting up to fall. Your functional ability to move in those extreme ranges where most people fall or lose their balance, or if they're on the floor, can they get off the floor?
Yeah.
It's worth spending some time on. It's worth spending some time on being able to move in ranges without heavy weight. Just move your body weight into ranges that are a little uncomfortable, a little more unusual, and honestly, just getting off the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think for those of us in the room that have aging parents, this advice is so important if they're not doing those very basic things of being able to, get off the ground without using their hands, picking, all those certain movements, because once someone over a certain age falls, that's usually
and
when
it could just be stepping off a curb. It could be tripping over the chair in their living room.
Yeah, and weights at an older age just get more and more important.
The number one risk of independence as we age above 65 is falls.
Yeah.
And the most common place for somebody over 65 to fall is the bathroom. Mm-hmm. It's getting up and down from the toilet. It's getting in and out of the shower. These are activities of daily living. What Zane is referring to, we take for granted when we're young and we can move and it's easy, but these are the very things in the back quartile of life that are threatening our existence.
Yep.
It's wiping your bottom, it's making a sandwich, it's getting in and out of just not falling. And it is heartbreaking. I did ER for 13 years, and I would see just what it does for families. You get a loved one who's falling. They can't go home. I mean, you die on the floor. You go into renal failure, have an arrhythmia, and you're on the clock once you're laying on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's very dangerous and it's very scary. And you can often end up saying, "How in the world did we get here?" We're talking about falling. All this fanciness and all this super whiz bang strategy, it really comes down to getting up and down and walking and moving your body, tying your shoes. The amount of people who could write any check in the world at 80 years old, who would write any amount if they could bend over and tie their shoes. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about basic activities. Yeah. Become the things that you'd give any amount of money. But there are some things that checks don't solve.
Yeah, not waiting too long to realize that.
And I've found the best way to be able to have it is just don't ever stop doing it.
Yep. Exactly the point. Awesome. So I want to turn to longevity and biohacking as a hot topic. And with so many emerging trends right now, such a note of conversation. One of the reasons we're having this conversation, because people are so interested in it, especially business owners and founders. We find a lot of A-type personalities that just really love this. So let's go through some of the most exciting advancements and discussions happening in the space, maybe bullet points one by one. And I want to start with hormone therapy. So how does hormone optimization play a role in overall longevity?
Essential. Yeah, I mean, as a species, we peak physically at somewhere between 17 and 25. The best athletes on the planet are in this age group. Beyond 25, you start aging as an athlete, and you start noticing a little more prone to injury. You start noticing a little bit longer recovery time, a little less tenacity. And the only thing different about a 23-year-old versus a 43-year-old, besides life experience and kind of more wisdom, is their neurohormonal environment. How fast is their nervous system twitching, and what's the hormonal regulator? What's that environment looking like? How are they sleeping? How are they recovering? What's feeding their skeletal muscles? As we age, as men age over 40, this becomes a really big deal. As women enter into perimenopausal and become postmenopausal, it is often dramatic for the ladies. You essentially, over a very short period of time, somewhere between 3 to 5 years, you go from this homeostasis rhythm of every 28 days of a hormonal vitality to hormonally barren. And there are tremendous health risks on the back half of life for women in a hormonally depleted environment. Brain, breast, cardiovascular, bone. Women tend to outpace men on the back half in terms of heart disease and things like this. And this is primarily driven by the loss of hormones. So I think there are a handful of people that it becomes difficult based on maybe a hormone-sensitive breast cancer or something like this that maybe becomes difficult. But outside, it can be managed, and it should be thoughtful, and it should be considered thoughtfully.
So Zane, would you agree, because there's obviously been a lot of negative stereotypes around hormone replacement over the years, maybe caused by bodybuilders or bad tests that showed that hormones cause cancer or things of that nature.
Yeah, there's a whole women's health initiative study from the 90s that really put a damper on it, and so I think set women's health back 30 years.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that.
Yeah. Right, and the misunderstanding, the fact that we don't have an FDA-approved testosterone replacement therapy for women yet. I think that's on the works. But I mean, they can get say, so you pay out of pocket. But I mean, the thing is, insurance will cover estrogen and progesterone, but not testosterone, and some providers won't even offer testosterone to women when it's actually one of the first hormones to start decreasing for some women right around 40, and they might need that long before menopause. And it's their primary. I mean, women have more testosterone than estrogen or progesterone as well. So it's so beneficial for so many things, as well as disease prevention, just feeling better, just like, get your life back, your relationship with your spouse. I mean, all of that is impacted by hormone replacement therapy. So better quality of life, disease prevention, it's kind of a no-brainer. You need to get eyes on it by 40. Like, start watching it so you know when something's off. And the thyroid should certainly be included in that. Actually, just a sidebar, there's the latest Peter Attia podcast has a Dr. Rachel Rubin on there. She's talking about hormones, specifically hormones for women or testosterone for women. So if someone wanted to know more about that, that'd be a good quick resource that just came out, and it's just people are raving about it. So it just came out Sunday or Monday. But it's I see a difference in male and female clients of just like, I remember this person. I feel like I got my life back. I feel like I got my relationship back. I have a client who's a vocalist, and she's hitting notes now in her 50s that she hadn't hit since her 30s, and it came shortly after the hormone replacement therapy.
Wow.
And so, because her vocal cords are more elastic, they're recovering. She's got more strength. She's recovering after a show. And so it's, I can't say enough good things about it.
Yeah, to the point you made, I like to say that we're a depreciating asset after 24. And so to simply put all this, it's just, we're not like, it's not that perspective of like you're trying to become something you never were. Mm-hmm. It's about something that you are trying to keep your body young and giving it the tools and the fuel that it used to make on its own. Is that the right way to think about it?
Yeah, I would say we're a diminishing physical asset. Mm-hmm. But and the divergence of the curve between your physical capacity and your wisdom. I mean, at 50, You got some life. You got some wisdom. You've had some reps. The problem is, if you feel like the average 50-year-old, it's hard to get a return on that wisdom. But when I can help a 50, 60-year-old man and woman feel 26 again, and then you deploy the wisdom with the vitality of a 26-year-old, this is where we get massive impact in these people's lives. And just as a quick spin-off of what Zane said in terms of hormone therapy done correctly does not make you who you are not. It makes you who you are capable of being, but aren't experiencing. And it's a wonderful, and it's uniquely personal, and it's driven 50% by the individual.
Yeah.
Ah, there she is. She's back. Like that kind of language is what I often hear from the ladies. I hear from the men saying, I haven't seen this guy in 25 years, and it's good to see him again. Like, it should feel very familiar when done correctly. If it doesn't, you don't quite have the recipe down yet.
Yeah, and this is why, of course, working with someone who's
Correct.
Understands this space, because there's so much nuance of bioidentical hormones and all the
And there's a lot of noise.
synthetic stuff. And,
Well, and the ranges that
Yeah.
your doctor might be looking at, they're standard ranges, which means they're based on normal for your age. Well, who the hell wants to be normal for their age when you're over 40? So it's like, there's optimal ranges that I know you work with. I've learned from you. I learned, and it's finding those optimal ranges that are generally outside the box.
Yeah.
And as he said, very individual to how the person's feeling. And that should be paid more attention to than the standard range. Generally, the standard ranges are kind of low for many things. And so,
question in the back?
Yeah, Adam, quick question. So is there a point after which it's too late to start the hormone replacement therapy? I mean, should everybody be evaluated for it? And
not that I've seen.
No, there's in my world, if you don't have interest and you don't have curiosity, that's okay. But I think it should be a conversation that is available, and I certainly think it's worthy of consideration for the individual to consider it. And in my world, I get excited when people want to talk about it, because I understand what they're being curious about. In terms of return on your effort, yeah. I mean, but like, when's the best time to invest, right?
Earlier the better.
Right, at 40 versus 60, yeah, that's probably going to end up better, but it doesn't mean don't start. And better is better. I would resist the temptation as a provider, and I would encourage my members to resist the recency bias and kind of like the lost time, like the biases around, well, maybe it's sailed for me. No. I mean, maybe some of the upside won't be able to be recaptured, but who knows?
And to be clear, there are people, one of my dear friends who he's 54 with a overall testosterone of 980 and a free of like 18. He needs no help. He's just genetically.
There are aliens among us,
right?
Yeah.
It's just so it's not that everyone needs to, but everyone should know.
That's a single-digit percentage of the population. I think I know 2 people like that that are 60 and have that height. But I mean, that's rare.
But knowing, I think, is the key.
But there's also 28-year-olds who are on the floor with their levels.
Yeah.
So like that is not the common, neither is the 60-year-old, but they do exist where it's bell curve distribution.
Yeah, and being symptomatic, I think, is an important point too, because the conversation I've always heard of people that is like, why am I so tired all the time? And that may be one of the things.
Could be. Brain fog, fatigue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now I want to go a little further out on the spectrum. Zane, I'm coming to you on some of the other things that are really hot right now being talked about, like NAD+, methylene blue, red light sauna, cold plunge. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on.
Right.
So any of these, or which of these tools do you think have any real promise? And then I'm going to get to peptides.
I mean, I think it depends on what your expectation is of them. I think like NAD, you're going to get a momentary benefit for a few days. I don't know that there's enough evidence of a longevity benefit other than you get more energy, to not be sick or to take care of yourself and do the things you want to do for your long-term health. You know what I mean? I don't think that infusing NAD as a long-term, glutathione on the other hand would be like a major antioxidant in our body that we don't make enough of. It would offload some of the liver's role, and could help clear some which we all have a lot of oxidative stress. I mean, that's the driver of disease. Red light therapy for sure, stimulating mitochondrial density. I don't know that the ones in the homes are as strong as they need to be for maybe long term. I think that's developing, but I mean, there's definitely evidence that that's stimulating mitochondrial action. And energy, methylene blue, I honestly go back and forth. I think there's people who feel benefit from it. There's others who don't. It depends on the source. Long term, because it creates energy, but it's a repeated effect. Mm-hmm. It's not like if I do this for 6 weeks, I'm going to get. I mean, there's nothing that's. Everything is like, is it a part of your lifestyle? Do you need to cycle off of it? A lot of it's so new, we just don't know enough to say definitively. Yeah. Is this ideal or is this help? But I mean, certainly there's some benefit in the short term for mitochondrial, and when we're talking about mitochondrial health or metabolic health, that can help. It just shouldn't be a replacement for the foundations of diet, exercise, and sleep. Yeah. You're building on top of lifestyle habits.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the pioneers in this space are experimenting so much right now, which is great for most of us because we learn from that and we see qualitative and qualitative stories, which, so I want to pivot to of course, we're going to go ahead and GLPs, right? So peptides, Ozempic, all these different things that have now become such a global movement, such an investment trend in the companies that are making them, and all these other peptides that are emerging in the longevity space. So we put a little slide together from some knowledge that Zane sent over. This is just a small sample of some of the peptides that are being heavily used right now for different purposes. So would you mind just opining on the world of peptides for a minute and some of these?
Cut me off when you're ready. So peptides, while they're new here, they were developed by the Russians essentially in the 1970s and 80s to help their cosmonauts, soldiers, and athletes, which is why they were kicking our tail in the Olympics back in those days. One of the reasons. So they originally developed these peptides. I don't know if they're listed on there, the bioregulators. Are those listed on there at all?
No.
So it's a line called bioregulators that were made for longevity. Basically, they're organ specific, so they stimulate regeneration in the organ. Then they started getting into more individual peptides and developing these. And they're basically, a peptide is just a chain of amino acids from like 2 or 3 up to 50. It creates a peptide. And so they're naturally occurring in the body. You're just enhancing something that's already there or recreating it to add the impact, to increase the impact of that peptide within the body. Generally to generate repair or an action that is desired for, again, regenerating tissue or stimulating, I could say repair, but energy. Yeah. I mean, a number of hormones, leptin, everything. The Barbie peptide will make you tanner and cut your appetite, and it's supposed to improve sexual function. Okay, so I mean, there's just they can impact a number of hormones. Some for cognitive improvement, some for stimulating gonadotropin, basically the hypothalamus basically to stimulate testosterone production.
But the key with these two, thank you for saying all that. The key with these is these are not hormones. These are stimulating the body to do something, or
they're the early phase of a protein. So you have aminos, peptides, proteins, and so what proteins are? We have peptide-driven hormones. We have like insulin's a peptide hormone. So we have. Yes, they're stimulating an action of repair in the body, or stimulating an action of a hormone release, of which can either kill appetite, increase appetite, stimulate testosterone, stimulate leptin to make you feel satisfied. So there's a gamut.
Well, and I think we've seen that the GLP peptides, which is what has made them famous in the U.S., the Ozempics and the Tirzepatides and all that stuff, probably have real staying power. They're changing our society in many ways. Do you think these other ones do too?
Okay, so the difference between those and what you're seeing, so what we have access to in the United States for peptides are either research chemical companies, which are experimenting, basically creating these, or compound pharmacies. And they are creating these in-house, and they're pretty standard peptides. What we see with the GLP-1s with like Lilly, like Lilly being the main one, they've basically taken a peptide, they restructured the peptide slightly, and they've paired it with certain lipids, fats, to make for a delivery mechanism to enhance its effectiveness to where it's hundreds to 1,000 times more of that peptide that you'd normally have in your body. But their delivery, so because they restructured it and added their own delivery mechanism, they can patent it. Generally, peptides naturally, you're not going to patent these. They've been able to patent them because they've repackaged them and created the GLP-1s that were available prior to them doing this just didn't have the same punch. They didn't deliver as well. They were made from more of a sodium-based solution. So these are fat-based. This seems to be much more effective, obviously. And so they've created something they can patent, obviously, so they can profit without being, and enforce that control over its distribution for the most part. So that's why those are so uniquely kind of in the forefront, because they've made them more powerful, and they've marketed them really well as well. But they can, and through that they have some legal FDA approved. They got FDA approval. A lot of these peptides don't have legal FDA approval, so you're wild westing here.
Yeah.
And who you get them from
matters.
Yeah. And whereas Lilly is like, okay, trust it. You know what you're going to get. It's the same thing every time. It's like, and it's impactful. So that's kind of the big difference with these peptides, and they're continuing to emerge. Like they're making more. They're holding on to one now because they don't want to ruin their tirzepatide market. They've got the next one down the pike. Yeah. That they've experimented with, which is still available, and Research Peptide and Compounds are making it. Yeah. So it's a GLP-3.
Yeah, you and I've talked about that, and it's fascinating because that one doesn't have the same side effects. But so it's a complex topic. Jay?
Yeah, without having a concierge doctor, for example, who does the average type A personality even talk to about this to know that they're getting good advice? Who would that person be?
Good question. There's a lot of experts. Right? And there's a lot of people who have been doing it for a while. I mean, there's not really a designation for a peptide expert. It's just kind of like, who do you trust, and then trial and error, to be honest with you. I mean, there's some people in the forefront, like Jay Campbell is like a big guy on social media. He's got his own peptide company. He's been an affiliate for him he's been using it for 20 years. And so who you would speak to, I mean, it's really emerging. You're not going to find an official, like someone's going to risk their medical license to talk to you about peptides for the most part. Maybe a functional med guy, maybe a chiropractor who's got a functional medicine stent might help you.
You've seen a lot of companies start to pop up too, these longevity clinics, the IV clinics and all that type of stuff. Next Health is one of the big ones. They actually just are opening 3 in Nashville. They're from LA, they're in Dubai, they're in London, they're in New York. That's where Brian Johnson, the guy who's spending millions and millions of dollars to reverse, has done a lot of his stuff. Now, that's not saying they are the experts, but they are ones who have invested a lot of money and time into promoting these as tools. So, it's a tough one. Yeah, go ahead.
I, as a concierge doctor, the way I would answer that question to somebody is that this is where self-advocacy and unique area of interest should drive your behavior. And if you're not interested in it, I mean, 80% of this is probably just going to disappear and be nothing. Just like all things. I mean, but there is some gold in here. The question is, I don't know. I don't know which 20% is the gold outside of the GLP class. I mean, that is very, very strongly evidence-based. But I think this is healthcare. This is not sick care in large part. This is somebody who's super interested in getting on the forefront, super interested in being cutting edge, very driven to do self-research. And through your own process of sifting and sorting and vetting and looking at research, I think that would be how I would recommend. I would be very, very cautious of any talking head if they have anything to sell you. Just use kind of your own kind of instincts when you're looking at that.
Great. Question.
So, you talked about baseline levels before, a little earlier. What are the tests that we should be taking so that we can understand our baseline levels for cancer risk, heart disease risk, whatever those things that you had on the slide before that can take our lives early, how do we sort of get started and understand where we are?
Well, thank you for asking that, because I was just going to go to like standard lab work that people are requiring. So it's perfect timing. So let's jump right into that. And I'm actually pull something up here and just add to the question that a lot of people are relying on standard diagnostics and lab work only when they go to their doctor. So Aaron, do you want to jump into sort of what tests and metrics people should be asking for and looking at?
Yeah, there would be some variability and nuance based on the individual, obviously. But assuming everyone in this room gets a standard garden variety annual physical, I could predict probably 95% what's on the test. If you have a pencil handy and this is interesting to you, I would add, the primary focus would be around metabolic disease, as we've said. So a fasting insulin, I would also be looking at your cholesterol particle number. This is called your ApoB particle number. Something called an LPA, LP little a is what it's called. Those would be wildly important. If you have concern for inflammatory disorders, I would get something called a CRP and an HSCRP. These are inflammatory markers. If you think you might have some sort of autoimmune or rheumatologic thing, you can add something called an ANA. It's a general screening for autoimmune stuff. What am I missing in the lab on the metabolic stuff?
We mentioned fasting insulin earlier, but I mean...
Yeah, fasting insulin, certainly. I assume your doctor is going to be getting a hemoglobin A1C, which is your 90-day average of blood glucose. That's pretty much gold standard at this point.
Thyroid.
A full thyroid panel, including what we call free T3 and free T4. It would need to include both of those things to be comprehensively. If you think you might have a thyroid disorder, you could also look for thyroid antibodies and a host of other little things specific to the thyroid. I would get full hormonal, male and female hormonal evaluation. If you still have periods, I still would get it just out of curiosity to establish your baseline during your premenopausal years. And then it would be really interesting to compare that against as you transition through postmenopausal changes. Men, obviously testosterone, total and free. I think those are the big ones.
Yeah.
Those are really, if you're getting that, you're in the 99th percentile.
Yeah.
And with the advancements in diagnostics, I'd love, Aaron, if you wouldn't mind talking about clearly.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't have any skin in the game here. I don't own stock in any of these companies. I'm not an advisor. I just believe in them deeply and think it's changing lives. The first one is Clearly. Clearlyhealth.com, I think, is their website. This is a fascinating company. It's basically a virtual heart cath. So by getting a high-resolution CAT scan with contrast, we then take these images and we can upload them into this cloud-based software that their AI overreads the entire coronary tree, which are the arteries that feed your heart, and reproduce with granular detail how much plaque burden you have, where the plaque is, and probably most importantly, what is the composition of the plaque? Is it stable or is it unstable? Stable plaque, known as calcified plaque, doesn't rupture. If you've ever had a calcium score, how many people have had a calcium score? Congratulations, you know about the plaque that won't hurt you. Not to knock the test, but it is the limitation of the test. It's better than nothing, and it was all we had up until about 5 years ago. I now never get a calcium score in isolation. We do follow calcium score, but as a product of Clearly. Clearly will spit out the calcified plaque, and that's interesting, but what's far more useful is your non-calcified plaque, your soft plaque. This is the plaque that is unstable, that is actively growing, and that if it ruptures, creates heart attacks and strokes. It is very useful, especially after the age of 50, to understand where you are and what is the state of the union as you go into the back half of life, if living a long time and well is a goal. And this being the number one killer of humans, I am very bullish on this technology. There are a couple of other companies besides Clearly that are coming in as competitors that are really intriguing, but it's too early to comment on them. But more and more, this technology is going to give us insight into the thing that matters the most, which is heart disease. Thing number 2 is Gallery. The test, Gallery is the company, Grail is the company, Gallery is the test. This is a blood biopsy. You might have heard of it. In our practice alone, this has saved lives, and we have a small little boutique practice with several hundred people. Cancer is the number 2 most likely thing to take everybody off the planet in this room behind heart disease. And even so, we have 5 screening tests, and if you're a man, you only have 3 because you don't have breasts and a uterus. We only have 5 routine screening tests. The other are colon, prostate, and skin. So no routine screening tests for kidney, liver, brain, lung, ovarian, pancreas. And if you look at mortality data, the data that measures bad outcomes, these solid tumors like ovarian and pancreas, these are unique killers because they're not symptomatic until you're late, and you don't get screened until you're symptomatic. Grail has now come on the scene, and for the top 50 cancers in the world, the other 45 that we don't have screening tests, this is a single blood test that we can send off, and in about 10 to 14 days. And now, to be very clear, this is what I call a sweaty palm test.
Yeah.
This is not like probability, or this is yes or no binary. A cancer signal was found, yes or no. And if it says yes, it also gives you with pretty high probability where it likely is. So it's looking for cancer debris, like genetic fragments as cancer, because it's uncontrolled growth. It's pretty messy, actually, so it kicks off a lot of mess. This AI can read the mess and tell you where the mess is coming from. And the idea is not that you will never get cancer. The idea is if you get cancer, you don't die from cancer. And the only way you don't die from cancer statistically is if you find it at stage 1 or stage 2.
Yeah. Yes.
What about false positives?
Yeah, it's a great question. I paused on doing this for my members for about 8 months because I was worried about the false positive. I had a meeting with their scientific team and leaned into them heavily on this, and they have a remarkably high sensitivity and specificity. Their current numbers, and their literature supports this, is about a 0.5% false positive. So 1 in 200 positives, you'll do all the follow-up testing and there won't be anything there. So you need to know that going into it. And again, I still almost was not going to do it because of that, but then it dawned on me that 199 people in that same logic would now know they have cancer and they didn't know that they had it the day before. I just need people to know that it is possible. What is very interesting to me is we don't know if this is a limitation of the test, which all screening tests have limitations. A rapid strep test, for example, which is kind of the gold standard is only about 70%. So 3 out of 10 people with active strep will be negative. So what we don't know is if it's a limitation of the test, or is this thing so tip of the spear George Jetson that it's finding microscopic tumors before we would be able to see them by MRI. Right now, the best MRIs on the planet can see a tumor at about 0.2, 0.25 millimeters. Well, it doesn't start at 0.25. So and you're always going to have that threshold of unbelievable precision of finding it without calling something that's not. And so we just don't know how sharp we can get it. So it's something to pay attention to, but it's 0.5%.
Lisa?
So at the start of the presentation,
0.05, sorry, not 0.5.
Yeah, thank you. This conversation is really interesting and helpful. So you talk about the leading causes of early death, and I think everyone agrees that the goal is to live and healthfully as long as possible. But everyone does die of something eventually. So what do you feel is what's a good death? Something's going to eventually stop working, and it sounds like you don't want it to be the heart, or so what's the best way to die then?
Skydiving?
I actually have an answer for you.
All the men are laughing.
One of the not so obvious advantages of seeing thousands of deaths in the ER, and probably hundreds of ways to die, and having lost my father and lost people who matter to me, is I've been able to put some language around what a good death is. And the gospel according to Wenzel is a good death is pain-free and at peace, whenever that happens. If you have, what I notice at the end of life is the people who have bad deaths are not at peace. And oftentimes they're in a lot of pain. And one of the byproducts of avoiding these killers is there's a lot less pain and there's a lot less regret. And there tends to be more of a peaceful, high quality of life. If you die in your sleep at 117, you win. Like I always say, like, I know I'm going to die, but I want for the first 2 weeks after I die, everybody who loves me to be pissed. Like, how could he die now? We have so much going on.
That's good.
That's my thing. And so,
like physically, you know, some part of your body stops working, right?
yeah, for me, like real talk, I have a life goal of around 150, and I'm an underachiever in my circles. I actually think it's on paper possible to pursue a multiple centurion lifespan. There are mammals that already demonstrate that this is possible. And once we start solving for the top 10, you start running out of things that kill you. It gets interesting. We don't have any solution for cognitive decline yet. And we don't have any solution that is reproducible or high predictability for atherosclerosis, which is plaque formation, which ultimately leads to lack of blood flow, and behind blood flow is the life. It's the life blood. We still have some mountains to climb for these really ambitious goals. But again, my thesis isn't whether I achieve it or not. It's who I'm becoming along the way. It's the kind of life that I get to live every day because I'm pursuing something, kind of my BHAG, you know, and then I'm shooting for something ambitious.
We're all going to run out of money.
So we've got through, I mean, just a little bit more than half of what I was hoping we'd get
Just start
through.
more businesses.
So that's great. But before we wrap, was there one or two more questions? Yeah.
I'll ask two questions real quick. The first is, what's your view on Senolytics? And then the second is, we talk a lot about food. What does your diet look like? And maybe as part of that, what foods do you avoid?
I take nutrition.
Okay, yeah, and Senolytics is, I think, emerging, and the supplements around that are probably helpful, beneficial, getting rid of the zombie cells, but the long-term benefit of that, I think, is yet to be seen. It's probably doing something, but we don't know what the impact is. Diet, man. So, oh boy, how do I keep this short?
Macros, maybe?
120 years ago, we had a 1% obesity rate. Heart disease was very rare. Cancer was very rare. Diabetes was almost non-existent. It was a fraction of a percent of the population. In fact, even in the 1930s, it was affected a third of a percent of the population. So we have created metabolic disease in the last 100 years or so. We are not genetically destined for metabolic disease. And we can see this progressing because now we're seeing metabolic disease in teenagers or 12-year-olds who are going to have a much shorter lifespan and experiencing heart disease and all these basically diseases what we're concerned about in our 50s, 60s, and 70s. They're going to experience them in their 30s and 40s. We've created it through our food system because historically we've eaten everything. I'm at the point after experimenting with diets since my 20s, so 30-something years. There is no macronutrient that's causing disease. There is no protein, fat, or carbohydrate that's causing. It's not a matter of what macronutrient is. Is it carbs? Is it fats? It's a toxin that has made its way into our food system, which can be in the form of a carbohydrate or a fat. But we have created processed food. 65% of our diet is processed food in this country, right? And that the introduction of those processed foods and the processed grains, processed sugars, and seed oils have created this situation. So why? It's not a fat, a protein, or a carb. It's oxidative stress. So when we have foods that create oxidative stress, which is the beginning of all diseases, atherosclerosis, cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, that is the driver of disease. when we take these foods out of their natural habitat, so out of the polyunsaturated fat out of the seed, or we take sugar out of the fruit or whatever, they become more oxidative. We leave behind antioxidants that are in the food and leave behind the stability of the food matrix where they are not decomposing. So we have created food that is in and of itself oxidative, and we're ingesting, we're creating more oxidative stress than our bodies can handle. That's disease. You eat a whole food diet, blended, whatever that is, we can see it all over the world where people eat different diets, but if they're eating whole food diets, they're an indigenous diet, not a Western diet. They have longevity, they don't have disease, they don't have metabolic disease, they don't have any of these other things. It's a history issue. Historically, thousands of years, we've been eating potatoes, meat, grain, fats, saturated fats, all these things. Historically, we didn't have disease until the last 100, 120 years.
Right.
So meat, fruit, potatoes, white rice, a little chocolate here and there, dairy, good clean dairy, is good. And then find the mix of that works with you, your lifestyle, your current level of disease. Now, if you have disease, manage some of those things, but that's not the plant's problem that you can't metabolize carbohydrates. That's your body that's diseased. Fix the disease or prevent the disease, and you're going to eat what your ancestors ate.
So I want to keep you guys on schedule to get to lunch. So last question.
Sorry, guys.
Yes. What are your thoughts on long form of fasting, like 7 days? People do once a year, or 5 days fasting, water fasting.
I'm still intrigued by it, but I've cooled off on it a lot, mostly because it's a pretty stressful process, and I'm not sure. My sense is there's diminishing return on the 7 days, and you're absorbing some downside. I love intermittent fasting. I love a daily 24-hour window where you have a fairly tight eating window, and I think it's a great mechanism in terms of a daily lifestyle ritual that kind of covers, as Zane said, the multitude of sins. It allows for some flexibility in your dietary thesis and the rhythm of your life and where you are practically. I think once a week, a 24-hour fast could be interesting. I think it gets more and more interesting the more metabolically inefficient you are. So if you have diabetes or metabolic syndrome or severe obesity, I think it's a fantastic tool to leverage to correct the biochemistry. I think if you're metabolically pristine, you're an elite athlete, I think anything more than intermittently, there's probably a downside. And this is a big shift for me.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of fasted workouts, intermittent fasting almost daily at some level. I will not do that anymore. I overtaxed it. I overleveraged it. If you're metabolically healthy, you don't need a chainsaw dietary strategy. You chisel or sandpaper. So clean up your diet basically and be active. But it elevates cortisol levels, which is going to elevate breakdown of protein to turn into glucose when you're not eating. So if you're worried about autophagy, you can get a lot done in 3 days. Do it quarterly. You can get the autophagy benefits if that's kind of your target, but working out causes autophagy. I mean, on a daily basis, if you got a 12-hour eating window, that's safe as long as you're eating clean. I wouldn't over leverage it unless you have very aggressive weight loss goals and you have an issue with eating outside of a structure, and it helps you create structure and change habits as a tool. And then as you get the metabolically healthy and kind of narrowed in, you probably need to lean on it less and less. Yeah.
So,
One last question.
Sure.
Can you just touch on rapamycin?
oh. Yeah. Can you touch on rapamycin, which has become such a popular?
So rapamycin is an immunologic agent that we discovered and created in the organ transplant world. And for a long time, the leaders in the longevity space were thinking about it like a fountain of youth kind of situation. I haven't formulated an opinion because I'm unsure. I've never been really loud about it. The people who I pay attention to who has historically been the loudest about it are really getting quiet about it recently, not so fast. So the answer is, I don't know. It's very expensive. and there's a large element of unknown. And as a general rule, anything that sounds too good to be true probably is. And anything that sounds too good to be true and gets positioned where you don't have to train, prioritize sleep, eat whole foods, big red flags should start coming up. That like hold tight for a minute, it'll probably fade out with the current.
So Aaron and Zane will stay up here for a little bit. If anyone has other questions, they want to come up, and let's give them a big round of applause.
Thank you.